In 1946, the U.S. Navy sent a massive expedition toward Antarctica. By 1947, official records list the scale first: 13 ships, about 4,700 men, 33 aircraft. The operation was called High Jump. And the numbers are real. What grew around them was something else. A trail of rumors that the Navy was not training in the ice, but searching for a hidden Nazi base near Queen Maud Land, in the region once labeled New Swabia. Decades later, even sharp mountain shapes on satellite screens would get pulled into the same story. So the promise here is simple. We follow the records, the maps, and the logistics. Not to prove the legend, to see what the files actually allow us to say. Before the red line moves south, the file board has to split into 3 piles. Not because the mystery is solved, because without labels, every fragment starts to look like proof. The same facts can produce different legends depending on what gets left out. 3 piles. First, documented. Ships that sailed, flights that were logged, maps that were printed, orders, reports, photographs, and expedition records that can be checked against each other. Second, interpreted. This is where real facts begin to lean. A large military force after World War II can look like preparation for a hidden enemy. A German place name on an Antarctic map can look like a footprint. Secrecy can look like concealment, even when it also belongs to ordinary military planning. Third, speculated. Here the story leaves the paper trail. Underground bases, escaped leaders, lost weapons, battles that should have left traces but do not appear in documents we can verify. Unanswered questions are not worthless. But the labels have to stay attached. This episode asks how 2 real expeditions, one German tied to science, whaling, and territorial ambition, one American tied to polar training and mapping, were later fused into a story about something buried under the ice. To see that fusion, we have to move backward, to the moment a German ship left Europe in 1938 for a part of Antarctica still almost blank on many maps. The red line leaves Europe in 1938. Before it reaches Queen Maud Land, the map itself becomes evidence. Antarctica is a continent ringed by some of the roughest ocean on Earth, far below normal routes of trade, diplomacy, and everyday witnesses. A ship heading south crossed into a place where weather could erase schedules, ice could block coastlines, and verification depended on the few people wealthy or organized enough to get there. That lack of easy verification became political opportunity. In the early 20th century, large parts of Antarctica were still being measured, named, and argued over from the outside. Britain, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, France, Argentina, Chile, and others had interests in different sectors or nearby waters. A coastline drawn on a polar map was not just geography, it could become a claim. And the waters around the ice had something states and companies wanted immediately: whales. Before modern substitutes replaced it, whale oil fed industries that needed fats and lubricants, from margarine and soap to machinery and chemical production. Norwegian fleets dominated much of Southern Ocean whaling, and Germany, under the pressure of autarky in the 1930s, wanted more secure access instead of depending on foreign suppliers. That is the practical world the German expedition came from. Ships, aircraft, survey cameras, economic planning, and territorial signaling. Not the post-war legend of an underground fortress. But Antarctica was perfect material for later myths. It was expensive to reach, sparsely observed, and only partly familiar to the public. On old maps, empty white space did not mean nothing was there. It meant most people had no way to check. So when a German ship sailed toward Queen Maud Land, a real survey could later be remembered as something much larger. Next comes the voyage itself, the route, aircraft, photographs, and records it actually left behind. That voyage was the Schwabenland expedition. Its record is much more concrete than the legend around it. The ship left Germany in December 1938 and reached the coast of Queen Maud Land in early 1939. From there, aircraft launched from the ship photographed and surveyed large stretches of ice, mountains, and coastline. On the map, those flight paths are the real skeleton of the story. Aerial reconnaissance over territory Germany wanted to mark and name, not a hidden corridor into the earth. The name was Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. The expedition also dropped metal claim markers over the ice, political objects meant to signal possession from the air. It was a gesture of empire, but a thin one, a symbol dropped onto ice Germany did not occupy. Logistics matter here. A permanent Antarctic base needs cargo manifests that make sense. Building material, generators, fuel stores, food, radio equipment, spare parts, medical supplies, wintering personnel, and a resupply plan through some of the worst seas and weather on Earth. The documented Schwabenland mission gives us survey flights, photographs, place naming, and claim markers. It does not give us the trail a base would leave. No credible construction loads, no left-behind permanent crew, no supply chain, no fuel economy pointing to an underground facility. The known expedition fits a short survey and territorial mission far better than a concealed military colony. Yet New Swabia stayed on maps and in memory. Once that name existed, later writers had a real label for a much larger story. So if the German evidence does not show a base, the next question becomes sharper. Why did the United States send thousands into the same southern world only a few years after the war? That question cuts from a German survey ship to a U.S. Navy operation so large that its scale later became evidence in the rumor itself. In late 1946, Operation High Jump sent 13 ships, about 4,700 men, and 33 aircraft into the Antarctic region. For a place with no cities, ports, or conventional battlefield, those numbers are enormous. They are also real. This scale is the strongest factual material the later myth has. But scale tells us something mattered. It does not by itself tell us what. Official records describe practical military goals: train personnel in polar conditions, test ships and aircraft in extreme cold, learn how equipment behaves around ice, develop techniques for establishing and supplying bases, expand scientific knowledge, and photograph and map large areas from the air. In 1946, those goals were not small. A navy that had just fought a global war was trying to learn whether it could move, fly, communicate, repair engines, land aircraft, keep men alive, and coordinate a fleet in one of the hardest environments on Earth. The strategic map was changing fast. World War II had ended, but the post-war alliance was already hardening into suspicion between the United States and the Soviet Union. Polar capability mattered less, because Antarctica was expected to become the next battlefield, and more because the Arctic sat across the top of the globe between major powers. Bombers, weather stations, shipping routes, communications, rescue operations, and cold weather logistics all mattered. Antarctica offered a brutal testing ground without a populated war zone. If machines failed there, commanders could learn why. If men could operate there, planners could imagine what might be possible in the north. High jump can look suspicious if you start with the rumor and work backward. Warships, secrecy, aircraft, and a German name make a dramatic shape. But read in order, the documents show a post-war navy testing polar operations, not a recorded assault on a hidden enemy. Once the fleet reached the ice, Antarctica began doing what it does best: breaking plans and turning ordinary danger into legend. Then the fleet met the ice, and the tidy logic of orders and maps became messier. Antarctica did not need a hidden army to make high jump dangerous. It had weather, distance, sea ice, mechanical strain, and almost no margin for rescue. Aircraft operated over white terrain where horizon and ground could blur into the same flat glare. Ships worked around pack ice that could close routes, slow movement, and force decisions on the continent's schedule rather than the Navy's. The records in later histories do show accidents, losses, and strain on men and machines. They show aircraft trouble, harsh flying conditions, and the human cost of running a large military operation at the edge of the mapped world. Those facts matter. They are part of why high jump felt dramatic before anyone added a secret base. But an accident is not evidence of an enemy. A shortened operation is not, by itself, evidence of retreat from combat. In the available official record, the pressure comes from environment and logistics: fuel, weather windows, ice conditions, equipment performance, and the difficulty of coordinating ships and planes so far from normal support. This is where the legend finds raw material. A large force goes south. Parts of the mission are military, some records are technical or obscure, men are injured or killed, the operation ends earlier than the boldest expectations. Put those fragments on a map, strip away weather and logistics, and the ice begins to look like it is hiding an answer. But the archive points to a different antagonist. Not Nazis under the mountains, not machines rising from the snow. Antarctica itself was enough. Once Antarctica itself has caused the damage, later retellings can replace weather with an enemy and logistics with a cover-up. The secret base legend works because its first pieces are real. New Swabia was a real name placed on a real part of Queen Maud Land. The Schwabenland expedition really flew survey routes and dropped claim markers. Operation High Jump really sent a large U.S. Navy force south just after the war. Some records were military records. Some details were technical, scattered, or hard for the public to follow. Men really died. Those fragments are true. Then comes the leap. A survey becomes preparation for an underground fortress. A territorial name becomes proof of a hidden colony. A cold weather training mission becomes an assault on something buried under the mountains. And Station 211 starts to function less like a place in the record and more like a container for everything the story needs but the documents do not provide. Test that claim against the same checklist and the problem remains. A permanent base needs people left behind, construction material, fuel, heat, food, radio support, medical supplies, resupply routes, and records that fit the scale of the project. The known German expedition does not show that chain. The high jump files do not show a battle against it. The paper trail points elsewhere. The archive explains why the myth became believable. Scale, secrecy, wartime memory, Antarctic distance, real accidents, and blank white space on the map. It does not document a base. And once that pattern exists, it moves with each era's technology. Radio stories become paperbacks, paperbacks become message boards become coordinates. Then, with a satellite grid over the ice, a new generation searches Antarctica from a bedroom screen, looking for shapes too sharp to seem natural. On satellite screens, the old myth changes shape again. Instead of a wartime file or post-war rumor, the evidence appears as a coordinate on a screen. A mountain peak catches the light. Snow gathers on its faces. From above, ridges meet at angles that feel almost too clean. The image gets copied, circled, reposted, and soon the claim is no longer only that Antarctica hides a base. Now it is hiding pyramids. The better question is not whether the shape looks striking. It does. The question is what a shape can actually prove. In Antarctica, a pyramid-like peak does not need builders. A nunatak is a mountain summit or ridge that sticks up through an ice sheet while the ice flows around it. Over long periods, glaciers can grind valleys into steep faces. Freeze-thaw weathering can split rock along weak lines. Wind can scour snow from one side and pile it on another. From a satellite, those natural edges can look geometric, especially when shadow turns one ridge dark and one snowface bright. So the observed fact can be real, a sharp, pyramid-like form in the ice. The unsupported leap is calling it a monument, ruin, or evidence of a hidden civilization. This matters because Antarctica does hide things, just not in the way viral images suggest. Beneath the surface are mountain ranges buried under ice, old climate records locked in snow layers, and hundreds of subglacial lakes sealed away from open air. Lake Vostok, one of the largest known examples, sits beneath roughly miles of ice, isolated in darkness and pressure. Scientists study places like this carefully because they may contain microbial ecosystems adapted to extreme conditions, or chemical traces showing how life survives at the edge of what seems possible. That is a deeper mystery than an ice pyramid. It needs clean drilling, contamination control, ice cores, radar surveys, and patience. A weak mystery stops at the first strange shape. A better one separates what the ice shows from what we want it to mean. When the file board comes back together, the story is clearer. Not smaller. Germany did go south. It surveyed Queen Maud Land, dropped claim markers, and gave part of the map the name New Swabia. The United States did send a huge naval force after the war. It trained, tested aircraft and equipment, mapped coastlines, and learned how badly machines and plans can fail in polar conditions. Those pieces are documented. The gaps open through distance, military secrecy, missing context, and a continent most people would never see for themselves. Later writers filled those gaps with Station 211, escape routes, UFO battles, and hidden architecture under the ice. Internet maps added another layer, turning sharp mountains and shadowed ridges into supposed pyramids. But the records do not support a hidden Nazi base. They do not support Hitler fleeing south. They do not support an Antarctic air battle with unknown craft, or man-made pyramids buried in snow. What remains is harder, colder, and more interesting. Ice miles deep, lakes sealed from the open world, old atmospheres trapped in bubbles, and landscapes we still mostly read by radar and cores. The false story asks Antarctica to hide our fantasies. The real one asks what Earth has been preserving in the dark. Following evidence does not end the mystery. It tells us which mysteries are worth following.